Have you ever been made to feel invisible by someone you love? Have you ever sat at a dinner table, surrounded by the sounds of normal life? Silverware clinking, dishes passed, the faint hum of a television from the next room, while the person sitting across from you somehow made you feel smaller with every word? That's the question that hangs in the air as we settle into the Carter family's dining room on a brisk Thursday evening in suburban Ohio. The sun just beginning to dip below the horizon and casting a pale gold light through the kitchen window. Evelyn Carter moves about the kitchen with practiced efficiency, her hair pulled back and her sleeves rolled up, a hint of flour dusting her cheek as she gently checks on a bubbling casserole in the oven. The kitchen is warm, filled with the aroma of roasted vegetables and the sweet, yeasty scent of fresh bread cooling on the counter. The family's golden retriever, Scout, circles her feet hopefully, tail wagging as Evelyn hums a barely audible tune under her breath. She glances at the old clock on the wall, 6:28 p.m., and wipes her hands on a towel, mentally ticking off the evening's tasks. The house, though modest, is filled with evidence of family life. Photographs of vacations to Lake Erie, Lucas's old science fair ribbons, a faded but much-loved throw pillow on the living room couch. It's a scene that could be anywhere in America, but tonight, the air is thick with an unspoken tension that seems to vibrate just below the surface. Gregory Carter strides in from his home office, the click of his dress shoes echoing down the hallway. He's still in his work attire, shirt pressed, tie loosened just enough to signal the end of a long day, but not quite enough to appear relaxed. Gregory has always been the sort of man who commands attention, at the office, at parties, even in the grocery store checkout line. He's quick with a joke, generous with compliments when there's an audience. But here, behind closed doors, his charm transforms into something sharper, more exacting. Lucas, their 17-year-old son, lingers at the top of the stairs, backpack slung over one shoulder, earbuds tangled in his fingers. He watches his parents from a distance, his gaze flicking between them with a mix of apprehension and quiet calculation. He's tall for his age, with dark, thoughtful eyes inherited from his mother, and a reserve that sometimes makes him seem older than he is. "Dinner's ready," Evelyn calls out, her voice steady but subdued. Gregory takes his place at the head of the table, inspecting the meal with a nod of approval. "Smells good," he says, but the words land flat, perfunctory. Lucas slides into his seat, offering his mother a small, encouraging smile. Evelyn sets the casserole down and fills their glasses with water, taking her own seat last. For a moment, there's a fragile peace as they begin to eat. The clatter of forks and spoons fills the room, punctuated by the occasional scrape of a chair or a soft sigh. "So, Lucas," Gregory begins, his tone light but edged, "how was the history test?" Lucas shrugs, pushing peas around his plate. "Not bad. I think I did okay." Gregory doesn't miss a beat. "Only okay? You know, when I was your age, I always aimed for the top. Didn't settle for just okay. Right, Evelyn?" Evelyn offers a gentle, non-committal smile. "Lucas works hard. I'm proud of him." Gregory laughs, shaking his head. "Pride is one thing, results are another. You can't just coast through life on good intentions." He turns to Evelyn, his eyes narrowing just slightly. "Remind me, what was it you wanted to do after college? Before we got married?" Evelyn's fork pauses mid-air. She knows this script by heart. "I wanted to teach," she says quietly. Gregory snorts. "Teach, right. And how far did that get you?" His words are casual, almost dismissive, but there's a sting beneath the surface. "Lucky for you, you found someone with ambition." Lucas's jaw tightens, but he stays silent, watching his mother carefully. Evelyn feels the familiar flush rise in her cheeks. She glances at Lucas, wishing she could shield him from these moments, wishing she could find the right words to deflect Gregory's barbs without escalating the tension. Instead, she murmurs, "I chose this family. That's what matters." Gregory leans back in his chair, stretching his arms. "Of course you did. But let's not kid ourselves, Evelyn. If it weren't for me..." Where would any of us be? He gestures grandly around the dining room, as if the modest trappings of their life are a direct result of his own greatness. Evelyn's heart pounds in her chest. She looks down at her plate, appetite gone. The conversation moves on. Gregory recounts a story from work, laughing about a colleague's mistake, then pivots to complain about the rising cost of groceries. All the while, Evelyn nods and offers the occasional comment. But her mind is far away, replaying his words over and over. Lucas stares at his father, something simmering in his eyes. He remembers the way his mother used to help him with school projects, staying up late to paint cardboard planets or help him memorize state capitals. He remembers the time she stood in the rain at his soccer game, cheering louder than anyone else, even as Gregory stayed in the car, half listening to a conference call. He remembers the way she always made his favorite meal on his birthday, even when she was exhausted from work. As he watches her now, he sees the way her shoulders slump under the weight of Gregory's words, the way she forces a smile for his sake. The meal drags on, the mood growing heavier with each passing minute. Gregory seems oblivious to the tension, content to hear himself talk. He discusses politics, the neighbor's new car, a potential promotion at work, always circling back to his own achievements. Evelyn tries to steer the conversation towards Lucas, asking about his friends, his plans for the weekend. But Gregory inevitably redirects the focus. Finally, as dessert is served, a simple dish of sliced peaches and whipped cream, Gregory sets his spoon down and fixes Evelyn with a look that's both patronizing and final. You know, Evelyn, you really would be nothing without me. I built this life. I gave you everything you have. The words hang in the air, heavier than the summer humidity outside. For a moment, no one moves. Evelyn's hand trembles as she sets her spoon aside. Lucas's eyes snap to his mother, searching her face for a reaction. Evelyn takes a slow breath, her gaze dropping to her lap. She's heard variations of this line before, but tonight it feels different, more cutting. It's as if something inside her has shifted, a silent tally finally tipping over. She looks up, meeting Lucas's eyes across the table. For the first time, she sees not just sympathy, but a spark of anger, maybe even defiance. He starts to open his mouth, hesitates, then closes it, as if weighing the consequences of speaking out. Gregory, sensing the shift, leans back, satisfied. He's won, as he always does. But the silence that follows is not the silence of surrender. It's the silence that comes before something breaks. The rest of the evening passes in a blur. Evelyn clears the table, the clinking of plates and glasses oddly loud against the hush that settled over the house. Lucas disappears to his room without a word, the door closing softly behind him. Gregory returns to his office, phone in hand, already immersed in emails and to-do lists. Alone in the kitchen, Evelyn stands at the sink, hands submerged in soapy water. She stares out the window into the darkening yard, the porch light casting a small circle of brightness on the lawn. She tries to remember the last time she felt truly seen, truly valued, as a person, not just as someone's wife or mother. The memories come in flashes. Her college graduation, the first day she held Lucas, the time she led a school fundraiser and felt a sense of purpose that had nothing to do with Gregory. She wonders if Lucas noticed, if he understands. She wonders if anyone does. Upstairs, Lucas sits on his bed, knees pulled to his chest, replaying the dinner conversation in his mind. He thinks about all the times he's let his father's words go unchallenged, all the times he's watched his mother shrink a little more, bit by bit. He feels a surge of guilt, then something harder. A determination not to let this be their future. Downstairs, Evelyn dries her hands and turns off the kitchen light. She pauses in the doorway, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of Gregory's voice on a work call. She takes a deep breath, her resolve hardening. She doesn't know what will change, or how, but she knows she can't keep absorbing these words in silence. The night settles over the Carter house, calm on the surface. But somewhere beneath, a current of change has begun to stir. Have you ever wondered how many times one can swallow their pride before it becomes a part of them? Evelyn Carter moved through her house like a shadow after that dinner, her mind spinning with Gregory's words, the echo of, "You'd be nothing without me," clinging to her thoughts like a stubborn fog. The kitchen was spotless, every plate stacked, every crumb wiped away, her nightly ritual. And yet tonight, as she closed the dishwasher, her hands lingered on the counter, knuckles whitening with quiet frustration. In the living room, the distant blue light of the TV flickered over Gregory's face as he laughed into his phone, caught up in some work conversation, perfectly at ease. The contrast stung Evelyn. How easily he could fill a room, how effortlessly he could drain her of color at home. Upstairs, Lucas lay awake, arms folded behind his head, eyes fixed on the dark ceiling. The silence pressed heavily on him, every memory of his mother's small smiles and lowered gaze replaying in sharp relief. He thought of the science fair in 7th grade, how Evelyn had stayed up helping him build a model of the solar system, gluing planets well past midnight, her eyes bright with pride when he won. He remembered her cheering from the stands at baseball games, her gentle nudges to follow his curiosity, her patience when he'd struggled with math. Those memories clashed violently with the image of his father, always correcting, always demanding, never quite satisfied. Lucas wondered when he'd stopped noticing the little ways his mother had faded in the corners of their family. The next morning, sunlight crept through the kitchen window as Evelyn prepared breakfast. Scrambled eggs, toast, coffee brewed strong. She moved quietly, but her thoughts were loud. When Gregory entered, he barely glanced at her, rifling through the mail and complaining about a delayed package. Lucas appeared, backpack slung over one shoulder, and hesitated in the doorway. Evelyn caught his eye, offering a small, weary smile. He sat at the table, the silence between them stretching taut. Gregory filled it with a running commentary about his day ahead, barely pausing for breath. At work, Evelyn's subdued mood did not go unnoticed. Her colleague, Marissa, approached her near the copy machine. "You okay? You seem distant today." Evelyn forced a smile, brushing it off. "Just tired, you know how it is." But Marissa's gentle concern lingered with her, a reminder that she was seen, if only for a moment, outside the confines of her home. She buried herself in spreadsheets and emails, grateful for the distraction, but the words from last night kept replaying, gnawing at her resolve. After work, Evelyn drove home in the low golden light of early evening, the radio murmuring softly, her hands gripping the steering wheel. She passed the library where she used to volunteer before Lucas was born, the local art studio where she'd once taken painting classes, pieces of her life that had quietly fallen away over the years. She wondered when she'd stopped believing she deserved those things, when her world had shrunk to fit inside the four walls of their house. That night, dinner was quieter than usual. Lucas picked at his food, watching his parents with a new wariness. Gregory, sensing the tension, launched into a story from work, making a point to highlight his own successes. Evelyn listened, nodding in the right places, but her mind was elsewhere. When Gregory criticized the way she'd cooked the vegetables, "You always overdo them, Evelyn. I don't know why you bother." Lucas felt something snap inside him. He glanced at his mother, saw the way her shoulders tensed, how she bit her lip to keep from responding. Lucas waited until Gregory left the table to take a call, then turned to Evelyn. "Why do you let him talk to you like that?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Evelyn looked startled, the question catching her off guard. She hesitated, searching for the right words, but all that came out was, "It's just easier sometimes." Lucas wanted to say more, to tell her she deserved better, but the words stuck in his throat. Instead, he squeezed her hand, a silent promise passing between them. The days that followed settled into an uneasy rhythm. Gregory's mood seemed sharper, his criticisms more pointed, as if he sensed a shift he couldn't quite name. Lucas grew bolder in his small acts of resistance, coming home late from a study session, refusing to laugh at Gregory's jokes, quietly siding with his mother on everyday decisions. Evelyn noticed a flicker of pride mingling with her anxiety. She worried about drawing Gregory's ire, but she couldn't help feeling grateful for Lucas's support. The weather turned colder, leaves swirling in the wind outside their house, and with it came the approach of Gregory's birthday, a day he insisted be celebrated with family and friends. Evelyn busied herself with preparations, planning a dinner for their extended relatives. Lucas watched her move through the kitchen, noticed the way her hands trembled when she thought no one was looking. He wanted to help, to do something real, but felt powerless in the face of his father's dominance. The night of the family gathering arrived, the house filled with the smells of roasting chicken and fresh bread, the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. Gregory held court in the living room, regaling their guests with stories of his business acumen, making offhand jokes at Evelyn's expense. "She keeps me grounded," he said, winking at his brother. "God knows she'd be lost without me." The guests laughed politely, but Lucas caught the uncomfortable looks exchanged between aunts and cousins, the way his mother's smile faltered. Over dinner, conversation ebbed and flowed, but Gregory's need to be the center of attention was relentless. He interrupted Evelyn when she tried to speak, corrected her on minor details, and, without missing a beat, reminded everyone of his role in her life. "You know, when Evelyn and I met, she was so shy she could barely order coffee. I had to teach her everything about confidence." Evelyn's cheeks flushed, and she stared down at her plate, willing herself to disappear. Lucas's grip tightened on his fork, his heart pounding in his chest. As the meal came to an end, Gregory raised his glass. "To family, and to Evelyn, for making this all possible. I do what I can to keep things running smoothly, but she does her best." The words, meant as a compliment, landed like a slap. The room grew quiet, the air thick with unspoken tension. Lucas glanced at his mother, saw the glimmer of tears in her eyes, and felt a surge of anger he could no longer contain. He stood, his chair scraping against the hardwood, drawing everyone's attention. For a moment, no one spoke. Gregory looked up, surprised by the interruption. Lucas's voice was steady, but his hands shook as he spoke. "Dad, that's enough. Mom does more than her best. She does everything for us. All those times you take credit, all those jokes you make at her expense, they're not funny, and they're not true." The room was silent, the only sound the ticking of the clock on the wall. Gregory's face darkened, but Lucas pressed on. "She's the reason I'm who I am. She's the one who's always there, the one who believes in me, even when you don't. You don't get to talk to her like she's less than you. Not anymore." Evelyn stared at her son, disbelief and gratitude warring in her expression. The relatives sat frozen, unsure of what to say. Gregory cleared his throat, searching for a retort, but found none. Lucas's words had cut through the years of routine, the unspoken rules that had kept them all in their places. After the guests left, the house was quiet. Gregory retreated to his office without a word. Evelyn and Lucas stood in the kitchen, the remains of the evening scattered around them. Evelyn reached for Lucas, pulling him into a fierce hug. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not just as a wife or a mother, but as a person worthy of respect. As the night deepened, Evelyn sat alone at the kitchen table, her mind racing. The confrontation had shaken her, but it had also awakened something long dormant. She realized she didn't have to accept the role Gregory had written for her. Lucas's courage had given her a glimpse of a different future, one where her voice mattered. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows. Inside, a quiet strength began to take root. Evelyn knew there would be consequences, that change would not come easily. But for the first time in a long while, she felt hope, fragile, but real. If you've ever watched someone you love struggle for their place in the world, or if you've found the courage to speak up when it mattered most, take a moment to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories like Evelyn's. Sometimes, the hardest battles are fought at home, and the smallest acts of defiance can set the stage for something greater. Stay with us. Evelyn's story is just beginning. The days that followed Lucas's outburst at the dinner table felt different, as if the house itself was holding its breath. There was a new current running between the walls, something raw and unpredictable, but also alive. Evelyn woke early the next morning, sunlight glancing off the kitchen counters as she brewed her coffee. The familiar sounds of the neighborhood waking up, dogs barking, a car door slamming, distant laughter, drifted through the open window. She let her hands rest on the counter for a moment, steadying herself. Gregory's words from the night before still echoed in her mind, but so did Lucas's. The memory of her son's eyes, fierce, unwavering, brought an unfamiliar sense of pride and gratitude. Gregory was up soon after, moving quietly around the house. He didn't mention the confrontation, nor did he meet Evelyn's gaze for long. There was a stiffness in his movements, as if he was unsure of his footing. Lucas, too, seemed changed. He didn't retreat into his room as he so often did. Instead, he lingered in the kitchen, helping his mother with breakfast, his presence a silent reassurance. They didn't speak about what had happened. There was no need. Something had shifted, and though Evelyn wasn't quite sure what came next, she knew they had crossed a threshold. Saturday brought the family gathering at Gregory's brother's house, a tradition Evelyn had come to dread over the years. The Carters' home was set on the edge of a leafy suburb, the backyard sprawling with children's toys and the smell of barbecue drifting through the air. Relatives milled about, laughter rising and falling in the late afternoon heat. Evelyn carried a casserole dish to the patio table, feeling the familiar press of anxiety. Gregory was already there, holding court with his brothers and cousins, his voice loud over the others. Lucas trailed behind her, hands shoved in his pockets, eyes scanning the crowd. The gathering unfolded in its usual chaotic way. Plates piled high, drinks passed around, stories retold. Evelyn kept herself busy, clearing plates, tidying up, checking in with nieces and nephews. She caught snippets of conversation, boasts about work promotions, gentle ribbing about old family mishaps, but she stayed on the periphery, as she always did. From across the yard, she watched Gregory, the way he seemed to grow bigger in these settings, feeding off the attention. It was after dinner, as the sun dipped low and the air cooled, that the moment arrived. The adults gathered around the patio table, dessert plates in hand. Gregory, perhaps emboldened by the laughter and the wine, launched into a familiar story, a tale about a disaster vacation Evelyn had planned years before. He imitated her voice, exaggerated her mistakes, and the group chuckled along. Evelyn felt the old sting, a flush rising on her cheeks. She forced a smile, eyes focused on her plate. But then Gregory took it further, turning the story into a lesson about how he always had to step in and save the day, how Evelyn meant well, but just couldn't get things right. The laughter faltered, uneasy now. Evelyn's hands tightened around her fork. She could feel the attention in the space, the eyes darting between her and Gregory, the discomfort settling in. Lucas's voice cut through the haze. "Dad, that's enough." The table went quiet. Forks paused mid-air. Gregory looked over, a smirk on his face, as if expecting Lucas to back down. But Lucas didn't. He sat up straighter, his jaw set. "You don't have to keep putting Mom down to make yourself look good." The silence thickened, heavy as a storm about to break. A breeze rustled the leaves overhead, the world beyond the backyard suddenly very distant. Gregory's response was immediate, defensive. "Hey, it's just a joke. Lighten up." "It's not a joke to her," Lucas said, voice steady but trembling at the edges. "You do this all the time. You make her feel small. I'm tired of watching it." Evelyn's heart pounded in her chest. She looked at Lucas, at the way he met his father's gaze without flinching. Around the table, relatives shifted uncomfortably, some staring at their plates, others watching with wary curiosity. Gregory's face hardened. "This is between your mother and me. Stay out of it." But Lucas shook his head. "No, it's not. It's about respect. You taught me to respect people, but you don't show it to Mom. She's done more for this family than you ever give her credit for." A hush fell. Evelyn felt tears prick at her eyes. Tears of fear, but also of relief. For so long she had wished for someone to say it, even as she'd convinced herself it was hopeless. Now, hearing her son's words, something inside her shifted. She sat up a little straighter, the weight of shame replaced by something lighter. Gregory glanced around the table, suddenly aware of the eyes watching him. His bluster faltered. "Let's not do this here," he muttered, but the power in his voice was gone. Lucas pressed on. "You always want everyone to think you're the hero. But you don't see what Mom does. She's the one who keeps this family together. She's the one who makes sure we're okay. You don't get to take that away from her. Not in front of us. Not ever." For a long moment, no one spoke. The cicadas buzzed in the distance. A train's whistle sounded from somewhere beyond the trees. Evelyn felt the world tilt, the old patterns of their family shifting under the weight of Lucas's words. Gregory finally looked at Evelyn, really looked at her. There was something uncertain in his eyes, a flicker of doubt that hadn't been there before. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Evelyn realized then that she didn't have to hide behind silence anymore. She could speak, and someone would listen. She placed her fork down carefully, looked at her son, and then at the rest of the family. "Thank you, Lucas," she said, her voice quiet but clear. "It's been a long time since anyone stood up for me." Lucas gave her a small, shaky smile. Around the table, the relatives began to murmur, some in support, others uncomfortable with the break in tradition, but none willing to defend Gregory's behavior. The atmosphere shifted, a collective acknowledgement that something important had happened. The rest of the evening passed in a strange, subdued calm. Gregory withdrew, his jokes falling flat, his presence diminished. Evelyn moved through the crowd with a new kind of freedom, no longer shrinking from the edges. She found herself in conversation with an old friend, laughing at a memory, feeling the possibility of connection again. Lucas stuck close by, no longer just an observer, but a partner in her quiet rebellion. That night, as they drove home, the car was silent at first. The streetlights flickered past, casting patterns across the dashboard. Evelyn glanced in the rearview mirror, meeting Lucas's eyes. "I'm proud of you," she said softly. "I'm proud of you too, Mom," he replied. Back at home, Gregory retreated to his study, closing the door behind him. Evelyn lingered in the kitchen, the house quiet around her. She made herself a cup of tea, the steam curling in the air. For the first time in years, she let herself imagine what life could be like if she stopped accepting less than she deserved. Over the next few days, the change continued to ripple through the household. Gregory was subdued, his attempts at humor met with polite silence. Evelyn began to reclaim small pieces of herself, calling an old friend for coffee, pulling out her sketchbook from the back of the closet, spending evenings on the porch with Lucas, talking about the future. There were awkward moments, of course, and fear still lingered, but the sense of possibility was stronger. Lucas grew more confident, too. He started applying for summer internships, talked about college plans, sought out his mother's advice. Their bond deepened, forged in the fire of their shared stand. They knew there would be setbacks. Gregory wasn't likely to change overnight. But the dynamic had shifted. Evelyn was no longer invisible, and Lucas was no longer afraid to speak up. One evening, as the sun set over the neighborhood, Evelyn stood on the porch, watching the colors bleed across the sky. She thought about the path ahead, uncertain, sometimes daunting, but finally hers to choose. She felt Lucas join her, and together they stood in the fading light, a quiet affirmation that things could be different. If you've ever found yourself in a moment where speaking up felt impossible, or if you've watched someone you love find their voice, you know that real courage happens in small, everyday acts. Share your story in the comments below. Your words might be the encouragement someone else needs. And if you want to see more stories of resilience and hope, be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss a moment. The hardest journeys begin with a single step, and you're never as alone as you think.